Hey guys, welcome to Coding After 30. In this video on this stream on every Tuesday, what I do is I just work on code. I'm building a project. I'm using React and Strapi for the backend. And the reason why I do these Tuesday night live streams is just because I like to show the reality of what it's like to code on your own. So if those of you guys who are starting out and you're looking to build the projects for your portfolio and you're struggling or not knowing where to start, this is a great stream for you because you could kind of see me work on my project, and then you guys could ask any questions that you guys might have about, you know, anything, right? And so in this um, live stream, I'm working on this team manager project, and the idea here is we're going to have an application where you're going to be able to create teams and assign users and assign projects and allow those, uh, you know team users to manage their teams or team managers manage their teams and do tasks. So it sounds like a pretty humongous application, and it is. It's going to be pretty humongous. But what I'm not doing, I'm not trying to implement all those features at once. What I'm working on is breaking it into smaller chunks and kind of working my way through. So if you just joining us or if you been watching us, and by the way, feel free to say hello in the comments. I just want to show you a kind of quick idea of what I did to initially start this project. Because the biggest thing why a lot of people don't finish projects, this is like the biggest thing, is they try to do too much at once. And so when you try to make a feature-rich application that has like 30 different features, you'll never finish your project. And so what I did here is I first decided what I wanted to learn. I wanted to, or what tech stack that I wanted to use. I chose that first, and let me show you kind of this outline that I have here. And so I'm using Strapi for as my backend, and here's the technologies that I chose. And I'm gonna quickly go over them really quick to kind of show you. For the front end, we're using React.js. We're going to be using REST API. To style things, we're going to use Tailwind components Tailwind and style components. And then eventually we're going to do a GraphQL backend implementation. For backend, to keep things easier, I'm using Strapi 4. If you're not sure what Strapi 4 is, it's a CMS, but to be honest, it's more than a CMS. And I'll talk about it in a little bit. But it allows you to set up an API really, really quickly. And if you're just starting out, you could easily set something up literally with 5 minutes and have a great backend that you could use to practice making REST calls to query your data. And so before I continue, I'll just quickly show you Strapi here, and I like their tagline here because it's pretty much what it is. It's design APIs fast and manage content easily. So unlike WordPress, which follows like a certain structure and a certain kind of way of doing things, I mean, there's definitely certain like you can't just do whatever you want, right? You need to have some sort of consistency. But what I like about Strapi, and I'm just gonna break it down. Not only does it come with this amazing UI, but the thing, and then you have all this functionality out of the box in terms of making um, all your CRUD functionality. You have authentication right out of the box, but uh, here it says build an API fast. And what I think of Strapi when I try to describe Strapi to people is basically a way for you to get bootstrapped or bootstrap an API, hence Strapi, is to start really quickly with a Node, or if you will, Express, or more accurately, a Koa server. It's more than that, but it's based on Express and Koa. And you basically get an API set up, and you have this amazing front end where you could come in and you could manage like your data. We have our users, we have our teams, which is pretty awesome because you don't have to, especially if you're a front end developer wanting to make a pretty good application, which is not just your regular website, but you want to build a web app. And I'll kind of show you what we got going on so far. So we have some basic authentication. So if I log out, I could log back in, right? If I log in, we have our teams and our users. And what we worked on last week, we worked on adding a team. So new team. So notice how I'm able to right away start writing CRUD applications very easily. This is a new team. And the beauty of Strapi is that you could start nice and easy. You could implement, create, you could edit, you could delete, you could update, you could do all these things. And what's awesome that at the end of the day, what it's setting up a node-based API. And so if I show you the code here, this is our backend here. Let me kind of go here in the, actually that's the front end. Let me go to the backend here, and I'll quickly show you here. And once you set up Strapi, you get basically an API straight out of the box. You have authentication and full CRUD functionality. It's very easy to set up. And more importantly, when you look at it, you have, if you're familiar a little bit with backend development, you have your API, you have your entities that you create. In this case, it's Steam, it's auto-generated. And I'll show you one by example just to show you how cool it is so you guys could see. Let me go back into Strapi here for a second. So if I wanted to create a new content type, right, I would just go to content type builder, and I'm able to add a new collection type. Let's say at some point I want to have posts, right? I want to have a blog attached to it. So it's very easy. So Norse here, I'll type post, I'll click continue, and we're just going to do super easy. We'll have text for title. We'll click add another field, and we'll have rich text for content, right? Super easy, just for explaining things to show you how easily you are able to use this to set this up. And pretty much that's it. I was able to create an endpoint where I have a post type. I'm able to add a title and a content to it, right? And the cool thing is I could manage my content within Strapi. That's one way of doing it, so I could create a new entry, hello, and here we'll do, this is my first post. And what's awesome, like I could save and publish, and now in like 1 minute, literally talking to you, I created an endpoint for us to be able to get posts. And if you don't believe me, let's look at the code here. Before, when I was showing you here this example, before we only had teams, and now we have posts. And what we have here, we have our controllers, we have our routes, and we have our services. And Strapi comes out of the box with create, read, update, and delete functionality right out of the box. Super easy to use. But what you can do is you could actually overwrite controllers, and I'll show you here one example here quickly before we kind of get into everything else, because I don't want to spend the whole time on the back end. We'll get to it, but I just want to show you how easy it is and why I like to use Strapi, because it's literally setting up Node Express, or more specifically Koa server. I mean, it's more than that, but in like 3 minutes, literally, you could do that. And now you have an API that you could easily test your front-end application. So for your front-end developer, it's very easy to start building something really cool really quickly. And I'll show you kind of here. If I go to API, we go to teams. So if you go to posts, notice on the controllers, this folder is empty, right? There's nothing here. And what Strapi gives you is this ability to override controllers or add additional functionality. So as you could see here, if I go to teams, I needed to kind of write some custom logic. So if I go to controllers teams, now you could see here, I have some code. This is the code that I wrote to override the functionality that comes out of the box. So the cool thing is you don't have to do this. Your API will work. It'll be fantastic. But now if you're looking, transition to backend, I feel Strapi is a great way for you guys to start writing backend code without having to build a Node server yourself from scratch. So this is or Node-based API from scratch. So this is pretty awesome. So I don't want to talk too much about the backend code because we're working on the front end code, but I just wanted to kind of show you this really quickly to show you like the flexibility that you have. And the cool thing is, while you're starting out, you could manage your content from the front end. Like for instance, I have a couple of teams here, and I could of course, edit my team straight out of the Strapi UI. This is fantastic if you're working with editors, but what's cool is that nothing's stopping you creating that functionality from scratch yourself and implementing it in your front end via making calls to your Strapi app. So if you could see at my React application, we are able to create team. I'll quickly show it to you guys again, and then I'll quickly go over the code, new team. Hello, right? Very original message. I click submit. Notice we just added a new team. And now the feature that I want to talk about and kind of show you an example is kind of continue to build I'm going to show you the code, show you how we're getting data. And then today we're going to focus on making a patch request to the Strapi server to be able to edit our data. So if you could see here, I'll show you by example, new team, maybe it's not new team, old team, whatever. I'm just not sure of the name. Hello there. And notice how I'm able to now have this edit functionality. And if I go to my Strapi here and below teams, notice how it changed the data in my database. And I think it's awesome because literally within 5 minutes, you got an amazing API going. And let me say hello here. Bang, what's up? Good to see you. Not even going to try how to say your name. I apologize. What Strapi tutorial do you recommend? I mean, I would say the best place to start learning Strapi is to actually go to strapi.io and go to docs, developer docs, and you'll be working. Now they released Strapi 4. There's a lot of amazing features coming out. So literally, this is what I use. I use the documentation. You could also get more information about Strapi literally on their Discord, by the way. Anybody could go and join Strapi Discord, and they also have Strapi Forum where you could ask questions. So the community is amazing. So you'll always have questions to answer, even if you don't watch my channel. But the point for me is I want to encourage everybody who's learning to code. And again, if you want to do full stack right away, not a problem. In my opinion, it's really hard to do. And I got my job first becoming a front-end developer, and then over time I started transitioning into full stack. And in my opinion, besides how awesome Strapi is in terms of letting you set up an API really quickly, it's the easiest way to get into backend development without actually having to jump right in and do anything from scratch. And because I showed you before, if you take a look at Strapi, it automatically generates a lot of the stuff out of the box. But like I said before, if you want to, not you don't have to, but if you want to write, especially if you're starting out, if you want to write custom code, here's an example of a custom controller that I wrote, and you have that functionality to be able to do it. But enough about Strapi. I just want to kind of show you that it's what is powering our backend, and this is what allowed me super quickly to set up some of these functionalities out of the box. So here's the thing, guys. If you're building an application, and we're going to get into the code, of course we will. We're going to talk about it. You're starting out. Let me just show you kind of like Netlify here. And a lot of people, they'll start with like basic projects, like a simple website. Fantastic, right? You building a simple website with HTML and CSS and JavaScript it's important, right? So you kind of starting out, and I have a bunch of projects here. I'm just going to show you one of the front-end applications we did, right? Just kind of show you, and then we'll get into the topic as more people jumping in. I just say hello, don't be shy. Northern Chimp, what's up? Hello. And so this is a simple application. It's a static website, meaning all the content is hard-coded in the site, right? It's using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm able to kind of showcase my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills, but that's it. That's kind of cool, right? That's neat. I'm able to make a website. Maybe next level up project you're working on, you're like, okay, I want to make something a little bit more complex, right? But I need to have an API that I connect to. So you could find a public API, and I'll show you an example here. There's an API that shows the information for the current pandemic, and so you could create an application against that API. Just gotta find it for you guys. It's somewhere here. I got a lot of projects here, some of them not finished, but here's one which is basically a simple application. It's not even an application, but it's basically getting data from an API, and it's displaying the data, and it has some basic filtering, right? But it's still not a full CRUD application, because all it allows you to do is just look up countries with the pandemic cases and display it. It's just an app that displays information. But if you want to create something more substantial, something that showcases authentication, user permissions, you learn about policies, you learn about, working with CRUD, this idea of what are controllers, like, even though you might not be doing that stuff from scratch as a front-end developer, you need to know that, because you will be developing your front-end against an API. And to have a full-fledged API with full CRUD functionality and authentication will allow you to start building an application and prepare you to be able to do the work that you're going to get hired to do. Like, nowadays, you're not when you get hired as a web developer, very rarely are you working on, basic websites. You're usually working on web applications. And this is why, for me, I'm like, man, Strapi is the greatest because I'm able to create an API, and then instead of worrying about, how do you create an API from scratch yourself, I'm able to focus on the front end. And check this out. We now have authentication, which implemented with Strapi. We have, this is going to be a full team manager, project manager tool. And I'm going to show you everything we're going to do here, of course, over time. But the point is not to get too excited. And I'm going to show you what the initial goal was and how far we got. And then if you guys have questions, I'll also show you the code, how I implemented some stuff. But today we're going to talk about kind of how did I get this edit feature to work to be able to update, if I welcome to the club, whatever, like I'm able to update data. I can't spell, obviously, update data. And Strapi is what allows me to do that. And as you could see here, I go to my content manager, I refresh, and I go to my teams. Notice how I said, welcome to the club. So not only am I able to create a new team, right? Create a new team. Hey, I guess, hey. And submit. And notice we have a new team. And that team is saved to our database, right? And so, like, that's pretty awesome. And now I'm able to kind of start working on more complex application, because if you think of it, every application is basically some sort of version of a CRUD application, a glorified to-do list, because you have create, read, update, and delete. Obviously, I'm simplifying things here, but once you know how to add data, how to edit data, how to delete data, or and get data, you pretty much now are open to build whatever your imagination allows you to build. And so this is kind of what I want to share with you guys in these streams, because the point is, the reason why I do these streams is because I constantly want to show you the reality of coding, show you that it's not as glamorous as you see sometimes, where people sit down on the computer, type for like 10 minutes, and all of a sudden they have the next Facebook. No, there's a lot of trial and error. There's obviously bugs that come up. And I want to show you the realistic process of coding, so you guys get motivated to be like, hey, it's okay if I struggle, right? It's okay that things don't work out. Let's just continue to build stuff. And so we have our log out feature here. We could log out. And so before we continue, I just want to show you and quickly review some of the items. So the way we get data, and when you're working with REST API, you are able to make fetch requests. But before we get too far the way, let me just show you a quick note. So when I first started this application, the first thing I did is I plan on what tag that I want to use. And I could delete some of this because we're not going to get to to GraphQL right away, but I'm just going to show you the initial tag we're using. So for the front end, we're working with React. We're going to be using REST APIs. Or the idea of using fetch to connect to a REST API. And then to style the application, I'm using style components with Tailwind. For our backend, very simple for me. I'm just using Strapi 4, and we're doing it with REST, even though you could do GraphQL. For our database, I have this deployed already. You could go to community1project.com to see like the recent, like how far I got. Again, this is still in progress. But we're using Postgresql, and then to handle images, which we're not going to do yet, we're going to use Cloudinary. And this application is deployed on DigitalOcean for the backend and Netlify. And I'm using Git for version control. Once I organized all this stuff, the next step for me, guys, is to figure out what is the minimum viable product. What does that look like to me? What is the most basic functionality that I want my application to have in order for me to say like, hey, this feature is done and it's deployed, and you as users could go in and check it out. So when we first started out, and I'll kind of make this red quickly just so we could talk about when I started out with this, I made like the simple plan. What is the most basic application looks like? And I didn't go super feature rich because I didn't want to create a situation where I'm not going to finish the things I'm doing. So the first thing I said, you need to be able to sign up. You need to be able to log in. You need to be able to do full CRUD functionality with team, meaning you need to be able to create team, delete team, update team, get the team. And then also, as an additional item I want to do, I want to add, if someone creates a team, you should receive an email that, hey, you created this team. And so that's it. That's all I'm going to focus. And believe it or not, this is a lot. Notice I'm not talking about how to handle like additional stuff like projects and tasks and adding and inviting users, because right now that's going to be too much for the scope. So we start simple. So now I'm able to kind of have this as a roadmap, and I could start working on my application. If you've been watching this live stream from the beginning, you could see that some of these things we did. So let's kind of test them out a little bit. Let me log out. So first thing I could do is I could log in. Okay, great. Login works. And so in my little code, in my little notes here, I could say login works, green light. Notice how, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to stay on this kind of sprint until I finish all this functionality. I'm not going to move on, because the point is trying to get the application deployed with the most basic features for someone to be able to, okay, I see where you're going with this application. Not to say like, let's come up with 30 features that will never finish. So login works. Let's see what else we created. Okay, so I'm going to check it. Okay, log out works. That's fantastic. So I did log out. Okay, great. What else is there? Can I sign up yet? Not yet. We're saving that feature for later. Can I create team? Let's log in again. Let's check it out, and I'll go over the code for sure, but for now I just want to kind of show you the thought process that I go through building this application, not to get too far away. And hey Frank, good to see you. Kin, what's up? Great to see you here. And so, can I create team? Yay, I made a team. Okay, submit. Yes, I could create a team. So I go to my notes. You see, like, I don't do any extra work. I only work on the features that I said I needed to create, and I keep working on them until we're done. So we could create team. Okay, so today we're going to we're going to review all the previous stuff first in terms of CRUD, and then we're going to talk about updating team today. But can I update a team? Let's check this out. I'm going to go back to my application here. I'm going to select any team here. Welcome to the club. Let's say welcome to the crew. And I'm going to say save. And then notice it saved it, welcome to the crew. And if I refresh it, notice it stayed welcome to the crew. And if I go to my backend with Strapi, go to teams and refresh, notice it says welcome to the crew. So I'm able to update my application. So that feature is complete, or something we're going to talk about today and show you some examples. And again, by the way, I'm building this application, and if something you don't understand, definitely ask me questions, because the point here is I just want to show you the raw way of coding and working on stuff. And like today you'll see what I did in terms of implementing the update team feature is that I just got it to work first. I didn't care about if the code is pretty. I didn't even care if it was the best kind of implementation of it, because first step is get it to work, and then second step, refactor afterwards. But the idea is like, let me get these features complete. So today we're going to talk about updating. Oh, by the way, can we view the items? That's kind of self-explanatory, because when you log in, you're getting the data. So you're using the get method to get the data from the API. And so yes, that works. So let me make that green. So notice how I'm slowly making progress to my application. And notice how I am doing the most important thing here is I refuse to go here, right, and add additional features that I want to do right now. No, I'm not going to do any of that additional stuff. I'm going to make sure that I finish this first. So after we finish update, or I guess talk about, we're going to do delete, we're going to do send email, and we're going to send this till the end, because that's going to be some custom backend code that we have to do, because Strapi out of the box, it only allows you when you create an account, and they do that by design for security reasons, is to just add your email and your account name. And but we'll take a look at it when we get there. So notice that what I'm going to do until all these things are green here, I'm not going to move on, and I'm not going to add more features. This is the biggest reason why people fail, and I just want to say that to you guys. And I have many examples. This is one of the biggest reasons why it took me forever to build projects for my portfolio. Number one, I was too afraid to start. So how did I solve the problem of starting a project? I just started struggling trying to build stuff from scratch. And I forced myself to do this stream on Tuesday nights to get myself feeling discomfortable, like uncomfortable when people look at me and I'm getting stuck and frustrated, and still be like, you know what? Who cares? At the end of the day, you still need to code. Who cares what people think about me? Who cares if I'm struggling live on this stream? Because at the end of the day, you have to get over your fear of building things from scratch, and you just have to do it regardless the failure you're going to hit, because failure is normal. Like, even senior level developers run into issues that take days to figure out. That's perfectly normal. There's no unicorn developer. Maybe there is, but like for a majority of the time, the reason why I do this live stream is to show you guys that mistakes happen. That's normal. Bugs happen. That's normal. I was watching a keynote the other day, and guess what? On their keynote, their stuff broke too. And they're like, oh, like, and real developers, they're not going to be like, oh my God, what the hell are you doing? They're going to be like, oh yeah, because that's normal. That's the normal part. And this is why I keep doing these streams, to get you guys to kind of be like, oh, okay, I get it. This is the reality of coding. This is how you get better. You start building something from scratch. If you get stuck, you go to the resources, the blogs, you try whatever it takes to figure out, ask for help, whatever. You figure out, you implement it, you move on, and you literally learn through trial and error. It's like if I wanted to learn how to box, right? I want to do boxing. I can't just watch boxing for 10 years, right, on TV and then be like, oh, I could do boxing now. No, it doesn't work that way, right? It works by actually practicing. So this is why I want to kind of do these live streams, to show you that it's okay to fail, it's okay to struggle, it's okay that people make fun of you. Just start building your stuff from scratch. By the way, if any of this makes sense, smash the like button, not for me, but for all you guys, awesome people in the chat. And if you have questions, let me know. So now we're going to talk and review some code here. And I'm going to, obviously, we have different levels of programmers here. And a lot of times there are people that are even better than I am that jump on the stream. So I actually get to learn something, which is fantastic. But we're going to start with the front end. I'm going to give you a quick review, and then we're going to kind of get to where we're going here. So this is a basic React application, and let me share my screen, guys, so you could see it. And I'm going to kind of start from somewhat at the beginning. So whenever you create React app application, you're going to have a public folder, which don't really worry about it. You're going to have your node modules for dependencies that you might have, and then you're going to have your source folder. And this is where all your code that you're going to write is going to live. It's going to live in your source folder. So you're going to create a component folder to put all your components. This is at least how I structure. I'm using context API here. So I set that up. And again, I'm just giving you the big picture overview. If you guys have questions, we could talk about it later, but don't worry about it. And like, let me make it bigger so you guys get to folders. I have a helpers folder. What the helper folder is just any function that I want to call from anywhere in my application. I'll just put it in helper. So I have this is regex valid function where I pass like some regex and some test case, and it's going to tell me if it's true or false. Very simple. Like I'm using it to check, let's say, email, or like if it's proper format, or a phone number. So I keep this living in the helpers. Then I have hooks, and hooks in React, you have your use state, you have your use effect, you use reduce hook, whatever. All those hooks, they come with React, but you could actually write your own custom hooks. And so I have a folder hook where I have these custom hooks to either save data to local storage, to fetch data, or to update data. And I kind of made it like this because I just wanted to do something that mimics how GraphQL works. Not exactly, but to kind of, I'll show you as we get into it. And then my pages for my application I have here. And this is example file that I don't need, so I could delete this. This is when I was testing context, make sure it works. But I have literally my home page, and the home page is what you guys see when you first come to the application. And I'll show you more code in detail, and then we'll slowly walk into doing our update feature. But first, I just want to give you the lay of the land, if you will. So this is the home page, and basically you have on the home page, you have the sign in form and you have the sign up form. Right now it's disabled because I don't have that functionality. And no, you don't need to be familiar with Postgres. And by the way, when you're starting with Strapi 4, I used to recommend also set up Postgres locally, but you don't have to. It comes with SQLite right out of the box, so you don't even have to set anything up. It's just going to work. And now I just tell people, just don't worry about it. Just start with Strapi Quick Start and use SQLite, because it's going to get you all the way through building your application. And the only difference is when you deploy it, let's say either DigitalOcean or Heroku, you're able to then set up your database there, but you still don't really need to learn a lot about Postgres unless you want to, or unless you're going to be doing some complex stuff. And by the way, building this application little by little, you're going to learn how to work with the SQL database, how to do queries and stuff like that. But that's the home page. Now, when you log in, you go to the dashboard page. So if I sign in here, it's going to go to the dashboard page. And if you click on Teams, that's the Teams page. And if you click on Users, it's the users page right here. So those are the pages I have, and everything else that's not living on the page, it's living in a component here. So let's kind of walk through the structure here a bit, and then we'll come back. So let's say if you start at the dashboard, let me kind of close this here. And I'm using React Router 6. And if you see like these ridiculous class names, it's because I'm using Tailwind. I guess this is one drawback of Tailwind. You have these crazy long kind of lines of class name attributes. But you could fix this by wrapping it either in CSS modules, or you could use styled components, which I'll show you the implementation of that later. But for now, let me just close this here because we don't need it. This is our home. No, I'm sorry. This is our dashboard. Let me go back here. So once you log in, you go to the dashboard here. And in the dashboard, we just using React Router 6 here. And we have 3 routes. The dashboard route. And whenever you land on dashboard, it will either display the Teams page or the users page. And if you go to dashboard view here, that's where I have my navigation and side navigation living. So if I'll show you here, when you go to the dashboard screen here, and I'll show you here, if I delete users, notice how this is dashboard view, and the dashboard view consists of the top header, and it consists of the sidebar. And if you click Teams, it will take you to the Teams route. And if you hit users, it'll take you to the users route. Today, we're going to stick with Teams here. So let's go and take a look at the Teams, go to the definition. So once we are in the Teams folder, this is where we are. This is where we're getting the data. So the first thing we're going to do, and let me say hello here. What's up, David? Good to see you. I'm working on an app where I want only one page to be React and the other to be HTML. How can I split them in the same application? I mean, your HTML would just render it's regular HTML, but that's a great question. Like, first of all, why would you want to do that? Because you could use Next.js or Gatsby in that sense, and you could get, I would go with Next.js, but you could get all the benefits of React, and then you could generate static pages, static HTML from your React application. So David, I'd love to know more about your use case. Why are you deciding to do that? Normally, like, I haven't seen anybody split. And if someone's looking to, let's say, have better SEO and static generated sites, like if you had like a basic HTML site with JavaScript, they're using something like Next.js to accomplish that. So I would probably say, instead of trying to struggle and figure that out, I would love to hear what your use case for that is, but I would say just use Next.js. And in our case, I'm using React just because for beginners, I feel like everybody should start with a React. Yeah, and then don't worry about it. Yeah, David, like, I just learning stuff too, and still learning stuff. But what I would say is that, yeah, if you're building something simple like something that doesn't have a lot of functionality, you just kind of just showing data, there's nothing crazy like here where you're able to delete, edit. It's just, let's say, a blog site where it just shows the blog and shows a couple of pages. Doing it with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is perfectly fine. But if you wanted to add additional functionality or have a combination of different features, like going with Next.js is perfectly fine. But here we are in Teams, and so we have a Teams table here, and we're getting data from our API, and we're iterating through the data, and we're showing this table. So let me show you in code where that is. And if you guys have questions, let me know. Tailwind is just like Bootstrap. It's not that much complicated. I would say if you're just starting out, for instance, like I've built a bunch of HTML and CSS projects already with just vanilla CSS. So for me, I wanted to try something new. But if you're just starting out, especially for your first and second project, stick with vanilla like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Or even if you're doing React, just stick to vanilla CSS first. And once you have one at least or two projects done, then you could learn Bootstrap first because it's more popular, and then or React Bootstrap. You could also then look into Tailwind. There's also Material UI or MUI now, as they're called. But for now, just stick with vanilla HTML CSS. For this one, I decided to use Tailwind, and because just for many other reasons. Also because I've done a bunch of sites with HTML, CSS. I want to try something different. So let's take a look, walk through this code here. And for some of you guys, you're going to look at this, you're going to be like, what the hell is this? What is this like use fetch query? You're like, I don't understand. Where does that come from? It's like, well, this is a custom hook that I wrote to help me get data, and I wrote it in a way where I could have a callback function that I could fire to get, and then I have access to the data, the loading, and error state. And so what it's doing is basically, and I'll show you the code in a second, but it's basically I don't know what that word, obfuscating, I can't pronounce that word. Basically, it's like a black box that has some functionality, but I could have just as easily did it this way. I could have just used fetch straight up here. And when I show you the use fetch hook, you guys are going to see it's just me implementing fetch, but I'm just putting it inside a use fetch query use hook that I created just so I could easily use it in other components. But this is just as fine. And what I did here for the put implementation is to just use fetch teams, but eventually I want to put that into a use hook. But let me just show you the use fetch query hook so you guys don't get like it's nothing crazy. All it is literally a function that is calling the basic fetch implementation to get the data. The only difference I'm doing it here is that I am putting it inside a hook that allows me to share this function with any different component that I want, and makes it a little bit easier for me. I also want to make it easier to have the ability to do a refetch. So what I did here, as you could see here, we have our use effect, and it's calling the fetch query. Here's our fetch query function. Oops. And basically all it does, you could pass URL and options inside here, and it'll basically will make that call to the API and get the data. And once you get the data, you either get the data, you get the loading state, you get the error, but I also return the function just in case if I want to refetch data. And I'll show you where that becomes useful in a second. So if we go to our teams here, as you notice here, we're getting our data from the API here, and I'll kind of show you here. Let me console log it here just so you guys could see. Console.log data. This is from Strapi API. So let me go to my application here, inspect, console log. Yeah, I have to fix this error. This is a error in the table, so let's ignore that for now. No big deal. But here's our object that we're getting. So this is from our Strapi API that's coming from our use fetch hook. And I guess I could walk you through that just to kind of give you like better understanding that it's not crazy complex. It's very simple. All it's doing is just getting the data. And as you could see here, we have our results, which is all of our teams that we're displaying here. And so if I go back into my code, this use fetch query, if I go inside here, all it's doing, it's basically taking a URL as a parameter, the endpoint that I want to use, and options that I want to pass. I have some general options here, and I'm overriding it with the props that I'm getting from here, only if I have to. And what I'm doing is I'm having three different states here. I have data. If we receive data, I have loading to kind of let us know that we're still waiting on data. It's not there yet. And if there's an error, we have an error state. And all I'm doing here is I'm just doing regular fetch, and I'm using it inside try and catch. When we first hit this function, it's going to set loading to true, set errors to null. It's going to pass the URL and the fetch options to the fetch function here, and we're going to get our response, right? And if I console log the response here, right, data from use hook, right? And so if I go back here, refresh, so you see I'm getting that data from the use hook, and I'm just passing it to my component, Teams component that renders that data. So the second console log is getting the data from our use fetch hook here. So if I show you the hook here, so notice how once I get the data, I'm setting that data to state. And what I'm returning my data from state, my loading state, and my error. And so what I'm able to do now in my team component, I'm able to say, if it's loading, show the loader. If it has an error, show the error. And if it's not loading and it doesn't have an error, just use the data, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm taking that data, and we're going to talk about this later, don't worry about it. I'm taking that data that we got, and I'm passing it into my table component. Now, the table component is a bit complex, not too complex, but we're going to take a look at it later, but just think of this way. All this table component does, it gets the data and it iterates through each item, and it generates the rows which have these columns, and these columns get the data set. So whatever we get from teams get set to our columns. And so if you look at our table here, once we pass the data to our table, it goes and creates these rows based on the columns that we provided. For instance, if I delete a column here, like I'll delete like these columns here, and you'll see that it only returned one column. If I kind of put them back, you'll see that we have data for the rest of the columns. And then the table, it will have to be like a whole lesson on its own. I'm still trying to kind of figure out the best way of doing it, but I saw this cool pattern where you create a table component, and then you pass your table columns as children, and you're able to pass props like the source that you wanted to use, and we'll use that data. For instance, if I put source team description here, it will basically populate team name with the description from the table. So notice how it says welcome crew, and no, it should be name. And so it's a great way and kind of easy way for me to add different columns. So if I want to add another column, like being it's, coming back in the data, I could just put a column, say whatever it is, let's say test, give it a label. I don't have a test in my API, but the idea I'm just showing you by example that if I did, it's very easy to display that data and add it. But we'll talk about this more. But the general idea, we're basically making a GET request to our API, and all it's doing, it's fetching the data and it's returning it to our application. And so I'll show you here basically what I'm doing here. And I actually found this cool. Recently, someone told me, I don't know who told me, but I guess this is called Thunder Client. And you're able to test your API instead of using Postman. You could do it right from VS Code. So I'm going to
going to show you here, all I'm doing is setting up my headers, content type application JSON. I pass my bearer token with my authentication, and then I'm making a GET request, and I'm clicking send, and that retreats my data. You see here, and this is kind of all the items: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 items, right? Yep, 5 items, 5 items. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 items here that come from the API. So we worked last week on this GET request. So now what we want to do is we want to work on put request. And the way put request works is, and if you never not show, the cool thing about Strapi is that you could always go to Strapi documentation or Strapi put request or whatever. Let's see what comes up here. And this is why I like Strapi, because it gives you a lot of examples, right? And so look, I go REST API, that's what we're working on, and it kind of shows you, like, by example, different. Okay, let's kind of get to the endpoints here. So they're showing example endpoints, how you would implement them, and then they show you how to make some requests. So you could do a post request, update an entry. So here we are. So here's an example. We're going to make a put request to our endpoint here. And what we do is we pass our ID and the data that we want to change. And that's going to update our item. And I'll show you here in Strapi. If I go to my settings, roles, so this is for authenticated controllers. Notice how we have our team controller. We have create, find, update, delete, and find. So update, if I click on it, here's the endpoint that I'm going to hit. It's going to be localhost 1337 API teams, and what I want to pass is ID and the data. And I'm going to show you that in the code, but before doing it in the code, I'm going to show you here within VS Code, just to kind of show you, to test it out. And again, if you're used to Postman, I apologize, because I want to practice using this new Thunder client that I discovered in, somebody told me about it in VS Code. So what we want to do is we want to make a request to this endpoint here. Can I make it bigger? Yeah. To this endpoint here. We want to set our bearer token because we want it to be authorized. And what we want to do is we want to pass the ID of the item we want to update. So let me actually look up the post that I want to update. So we have teams, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have ID of 39, right? And so now I'm going to go back to my application here, put ID 39. That's what I want to pass. That's how we're going to identify the option we want to change. And so we want to pass in the body. I believe it's going to be the items that we want to change. I believe it's going to be, oh, what am I doing? Come back here. It's going to be JSON. It's going to be data. And then you pass the items that you want to change. What do we have here? We have team name and team description. Let's just change the team name, and you just pass it as a JSON object. We just did this. And so in theory, when I hit send, this should make a put request to our endpoint, and it's going to change the team name. Let's see it. So, okay, and we have a response. 200, okay, that means it worked. We could also see that team name was changed. We just did this. And so if we go back to our application, and oops, not home, I refresh, and look, it says we just did this. So we were able to test our request, and we could have done it in Postman. I'm just trying to use this cool tool in VS Code, because if you could do everything in VS Code, why not, right? It makes sense. And so we know that we are able to make a request to this endpoint, and we know that all we need to pass is the ID of the item we want to change, and we want to just pass the data that we want to change. So as a kind of big picture overview, what I'm doing here is when I click edit, I'm able to change stuff here. You know, item 2, item 1. And what's happening here, it's saving this in state. And when I click save, this items that I saved in state, I'm passing to that fetch function that's going to make that put request. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you that in code. So notice how those items change. So if I go back to my code here, let's close this here, and let's make this window smaller. So I have this handle update request, and that's exactly what we talked about, guys. We basically are going to use the fetch API, that's standard. You have access to it. You don't have to add Axios. A lot of people do tutorials with Axios. Axios is great, but you have fetch available, so just use fetch. And all we're doing here in fetch, we're passing our team URL and the ID of the item we want to change. And we're getting it from our form. We're getting the ID and we're getting our data. And then the second argument is the options. We want to make a put request. We want to, in the headers, put content type application JSON. We want to pass our authorization bearer token. And then we want to put the data in the body that we want to change in a JSON format. So everything that we're showing here, we just manually did by making a request here. So like, check this out here. Notice, same thing. We have headers, we have content type, application JSON, right? You see, content type, application JSON. We're passing our bearer token for authorization. Here we are, we're passing our authorization bearer token, provide the valid token. And then we are in our body passing the items we want to change, right? I click send. We want to do this again, and it just updated the data. So if we go back to our application and refresh, like, check this out, we just did this again. We changed that. And so basically, if you look at our code, and if you guys have questions, let me know, and I'll take a look at the comments in just a second. So if you look at our teams folder, teams file here, we have an async await function here called handle update request, and I'm passing this into my table because that's where I'm checking for the changes. I'll show you that in a second. The table just gets a little bit complex, but at the end of the day, all we're doing is making a simple fetch request. We're passing the URL with the ID that we want to change, and that ID we get from the form. We also pass the form data. We make a put request. We have our header options, make sure that we put our token for authorized request, and then we put our item in the body. So whenever I click save, edit here, if I click save, it's gonna fire that put request. And to kind of make it kind of obvious, I'm gonna put alert here. So normally you wouldn't do that, but update team. So notice how I hit edit, nothing happens. I hit save, look, update team. And so let me just answer some questions quickly before we continue. So Ahmed says, hello, Paul. I work on a project. I want to track user events. Do you have any idea? And what do you mean user events? Like what they do, for instance, if a user creates a team, if they add or delete. So you basically want to log their actions. Is that what you mean, Ahmed? Let me know. And David says, which database are you using for the backend? So the backend is using Postgresql. So I'll quickly show you this before kind of continuing this. Great question. So I have this deployed on DigitalOcean. And my internet is a bit slow. I'm in the woods. So I have this already deployed on DigitalOcean, and basically on DigitalOcean for Strapi, you're able to set up PostgreSQL. So let me, once it opens and loads, so I have my application and my team project. So I have the Strapi app running here, but then I also have a version of Postgres running here on the back end. So at the end of the day, it's running Strapi and PostgreSQL. And I think PostgreSQL is a really good database to kind of, be able to, learn about, because most of the jobs you're going to have, they're going to be using some sort of SQL database. And I don't know what you mean by users actions. Like what? Because like, what do you mean like users actions? Give me some examples of what a user action would be. Yeah, let me know. But anyway, back to the application here. So basically, we have a function that, when fired, it's going to make a fetch call, and it's going to make a put request with all of our data here. And all I'm doing here, I'm just taking this handle update request, right? And I'm passing it to my table, which has the logic for the form. So I'm passing it here. And I have the prop available on each table row. So as you could see here, I called it update. That's the callback function we're calling. And so whenever you hit submit, this will run first, like alert step 1. Then it's going to call our callback function. And the callback function is basically the function that we passed from Teams. It's basically calling handle update request. This is called second. And then after everything is said and done, it updated successfully. So if we go back to our logic here, oh, not here, here. So if I go edit, update, let's do hello, and click save. Notice we have step 1. Step 1 is happening from our table row, where I have a onClick event, which handles submit. So whenever you hit the save button, it will fire the onClick event to handle submit. Handle submit right here. We saw step 1. It calls our update callback function. So if I click next, I clicked too fast. It showed the second one, and then updated successfully. So the second time, let me do that again here so you guys could see it. Edit, save, step 1. Step 2, interesting why it doesn't call it. Let's check it out here. Yeah, it should call it. Maybe it happens too quickly. That's a great one. But it is calling this code because that's what's actually updating the items via our API. Oh, it showed second call, and then now it's saying updated successfully. Oh, that's right, because we're waiting for it to go back. So perfect. So everything works. So in the most basic sense, what we were doing is we were passing this function to our table. And the reason why it's to our table, because each table row, like if you could see here, look, we could have multiple edit items. So look, I'm just going to do this, and I should have took the, and see, like, you need to have the form in each individual row because you're editing each individual row here. And so that's why I had to pass that function to each row to be able to update or at least get the data from each row that's edited. And if you could see here, it's the standard. We have handle change. So whenever someone types in the input, we get the value, and that value is saved in state, right? It's saved in data. And then we're passing that state to our team's handle update request function, and we're making the changes. And so what I'm going to do, not today, but next, I'm going to refactor not to use this function. Not that it matters, but I have a use hook that I created that you could use to update data by passing the URL and the parameters that you want. So if you look at hooks, I have use fetch mutation, which basically will do the same thing I just did, except it's just going to use fetch mutation hook, which basically allow me, instead of rewriting a different handle update request function with different parameters, it will just allow me to use that hook in multiple places. So I know that might have been like confusing, but with that being said, like, let me know if you guys have any questions. I like, that was a lot of stuff. And what I'll do, like, maybe I'll come up with some simple examples which kind of showcase the flow rather than inside the application. But I wanted to show you kind of this because I wanted to give you guys an idea. Maybe we could implement delete right now, by the way. That'll be kind of fun. But I wanted to show you, yeah, let's do that. Let's implement delete. But I wanted to show you how, like, it looks in someone's code when they're just working on the code, how they're thinking through it. And a lot of times, like, the stuff that I just did, like I said, I just wanted to get the edit feature to work, but I'm not saying that it's even the best implementation, and that's okay. Get it to work first, and then you could refactor and make things better. But let's try to make this delete work, right? That should be super easy because all we got to do is pass the delete button. And yeah, so to do that, it's gonna be a couple of different steps. But if you're having a store and you want to set an algorithm, what you could do is you could kind of remember what products people clicked on, and when they click on a product, you might have an array that product gets pushed, and you could have it as, like, interested items, and that way, even though they might have not put it in their cart, you're gonna have that state saved somewhere, like in a database. Like, so you could have an authenticated user. They came in, they clicked on a bunch of places. Like, they looked at the T-shirt, they look at here and there, and every time they click on an item, it just saves it to an array, and then you write it to a database where it's like, this user is interested in these items. So that's like oversimplifying it, but that's like one way of doing it. You could keep track and then of what items people are clicking on in terms of seeing what they're interested in. But what I would say, instead of even implementing something like that too crazy, what you could start with is do something a little bit more basic, where you have ability of people like the items first before they purchase. So for instance, like, you could have like a heart, and if they're interested, they could put a heart, and that way they could save it, for later for themselves, and also the items that they like. But normally, like, in terms of how you would do it, that's one way to approach it. But basically, all you got to do is figure out a way how to track which products your user clicked, and then at the end of the day, you have to figure out a way to save it to a database so you could have that data to use next time your user logs in. You could be like, hey, last time you were here, you were interested in these products, and you show them the products they were interested in. Yes. Uh, any free option for DB. So what I would say, if you want a free option for a database, just deploy your application to Heroku. They have a free tier, but DigitalOcean, apparently, like, they don't. It's not that expensive, but sometimes, like, even not expensive is a lot of money. So I totally get it. So go with Heroku for a free option for a DB. It's perfectly fine. And then that's a great question. What's the difference between Postgres and MySQL? I guess the company. I think like as I've worked with MySQL when I worked with C# and ASP.NET, and the querying language, like it's still like MySQL. So like to me, I'm sure there's some differences, but when I was working with it, it's the same querying that I was doing for Postgres and SQL. So I'm not like an expert in Postgres and MySQL, but for me, like they're very similar enough that like if you know one, you know 80% of the other one, pretty much. And can you please show me how you pass access or the token or refresh token? Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. Originally, I did it where I would literally just do so. Uh, like right now, you see here, I have token coming from use context. So what I'm doing, and I'll kind of walk you through that flow in a second. So one way to do it, the easiest way, if you don't want to use context, is to when someone logs in. So let's go to the login page here. We go to the sign in form. When someone logs in, right, we get back. Let me go function password, validate password. Hold on, let me close a bunch of stuff. I have too much stuff here. Use effect. Okay, handle input change, validate. I have some form validation here. Hold on, give me a second. Form validation. Okay, handle submit. So what happens is once you make a post request with the data, right? And I'm having it happen in the hook, but you would, I'm passing it to my custom hook I made it, but if I didn't have the custom hook, you would get a response and you would handle it here. And the response would have the JWT token that you got, and then you could save it to local storage, or what I'm doing it is I'm saving it to context. So when I get the data back and it's coming back from my hook, so you see login right here is what I called my custom hook. When you pass the data, it goes into the use fetch mutation hook. This is a custom hook, and you could have done it all in that file. I just decided to be a little bit fancy. It's not that fancy, but just trying. And basically, it does the fetch request, it gets the data back, and it returns that data. That data will have the user ID and the JWT token. So if I go back to dashboard here, not dashboard, what am I doing? Sign in form. Let me close this one. And so we get this back when we log in, and it's going to have console.log JWT token and user data from request. So let's go back here. Nope, wrong button. Let me log out first, inspect. So when I log in, sign in, let's go to console log. Again, don't worry about that error. But notice how from our response, we get our JWT token and user. So the simplest way to do, once you get that back, you could save it to local storage. And I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm saving it to local storage. So if you look at local storage here, I have that data available in local storage. And what you could do is where you're making your get request or put request, you could just get local storage and get the data from here. The only thing I'm doing differently is I'm adding an extra step where I am using context to save it to local storage. And then local storage, if I refresh here, you see how I don't lose this data because it's saved in local storage. And what it's doing it every time I refresh, it's going to rehydrate my context data here. I know it sounds a little bit kind of hard to follow. Let me show you here. This is the back end. This is front end here. No, that's the back end. I have too many things open. Source. So contacts, global contacts here. So you could see here, you see right here, I'm basically doing the same thing I was telling you where you save the data to local storage. I'm just doing it within context because what I want is I want my contacts to keep all the state and I wanted to get um, rehydrated from local storage here. But what you could do is you could literally, to get the token, just do local storage get item and pass the key where you're saving your um, token. And so let me know if you're like super confused about that. But again, like I didn't go the simplest way. In the most simplest way, you could just use local storage to set the data and get the data. So I guess I could show you an example. Actually, I'll just do an example here. Check this out. Let's go back to, and then we'll do delete before we end the stream. We have some time. Okay, so check this out. Like actually, I'll show you. Let's go to, I don't think it's going to break anything. Styled, we want to go to pages, home page, sign in form, go to definition. Not, come on, go to my sign in form. Okay, so I'm using context, but you could just as easily do here where I'm getting the JWT token. You could say local storage set item. Frank's token, and it's gonna save the JWT. So check this out. If I go back to log in, log out, and then go to sign in, and see here we have Frank's token. It's saved in local storage. And then what you would do where you're making the request, and like this is not what I did, but I'm just showing you in the most simplest way. So we know that this is already saved in local storage. So let's go to Teams, right? So I want to pass the token here. So what I would do, and I used contacts, but what you would do is go const Frank's token equals local storage get item Frank's token, and then we're gonna console, right? I'm gonna, and then you would just pass it here. So basically, you could use local storage like this. And so this would have the token available. I decided to put it in contacts API and use that as my global state and then have contacts be saved to local storage. But you could do it directly like we did here. So I hope that makes sense. Frank, let me know if it doesn't, because a lot of times I say stuff that doesn't make sense. So now let's implement. So since we got this far, so let's implement the delete functionality. So I'm going to do it in the most simplest way possible for me right now, but then I'm going to refactor my code, but just to get an idea here. So what I'm going to do is go to Teams. And again, here's like the questions you have. So see how I have handle update request. We're going to make one async handle delete request. But some people say, well, why don't you put this logic in the table? Well, you can, but then it would make the table not flexible because why if this is, because I'm using the same table to show users, to show, teams, I might have like 20 more tables in my application, and those tables might have, projects, tasks, whatever. And Ahmed, you're welcome. And Carl, what's up? Good to see you. And so you will have a bunch of different tables. And so you don't want the table to know what data. You just want it to be able to display the data. Otherwise, it's not going to be flexible. And that's why I am passing uh, these functions to the table, because this way I could have a teams table, a user table, a whatever table. And depending on what table it is, I could pass whatever requests I want. And so to delete an item, I think you just pass the ID and you make a delete request. So um, you could literally follow the same kind of functionality here. If you're using async await, you want to do try and catch. And then we'll figure out better error handling later. That's an extra one. The cool thing is, because I'm using Strapi, they have like really good documentation. So response equals await fetch team URL. We want to pass the ID. We don't need the data because we're deleting. And then the second argument is the options that we pass. And that's going to be method delete. Oh yeah, because we are making an authorized request, we want to make sure that we have the content type. That's regardless in the headers. You just need it. But for our purposes, because we're making authorized requests, we want to make sure that we pass the token. And then I'm going to const data await response. There's an extra something missing here. What am I missing here? Jesus Christ. No, I'm missing an extra bracket. Okay, I think I figured that out. Okay, and then we'll just get data. I don't remember if you get a response when you delete data, but we'll just put it here. Data deleted. So basically what we're doing here is we're making a fetch request to our team's URL, and we pass the ID of the item we want to delete. And the method is delete in the headers. We just want to make sure that we pass our authorization token. And in theory, this should delete the data. The one thing it's not going to do, it's not going to refresh our table once we delete it. And I'll show you that, and I'll show you the fix, how it works. But before we do that, let's pass our delete. And we're going to pass handle delete request. And it's complaining. Let me handle delete async. Okay, let me close this one. Await. Okay, that looks good. I don't see why it's complaining. It's okay. Sometimes it's just slow. That's why it's complaining. And then we should have access to the delete prop inside our table. Let me just take a look here. So it will be passed through children, and it's gonna go to our table row. Actually, we gotta pass it to the delete. So here we go. We're passing it as a prop. I like how it likes to complain. What are you complaining about? You're always complaining. All about complaining. Delete that works. And then we so it's not, it's complaining about the naming delete. So I probably shouldn't I'll call it delete, so I'm going to call it remove. So that makes sense. It's complaining about the naming. Remove. And then we want to make sure in Teams we call it a remove. That's what it's complaining before. So now we have access to table columns. No, we got to go to table. Got to go to table row. And so now we have access to remove callback function. And then what we want to do when someone hits the delete button, I already wired this logic. So we have the delete button here somewhere, I don't know. Say we have handle delete. When someone clicks delete, handle delete function will be called. And so what we're going to do, we're going to fire that delete, and we called it remove. And we're going to pass our data.id. That's how we know what's the ID we want to use to delete the entry. So basically, quickly review. We have our handle delete request function here, which has the logic of what needs to happen. And I'm just going to do alert delete called. And then here we're going to do dot finally, not dot finally, just finally, just at the very end, console log, just so we have some reference. Delete item deleted. Okay, so basically we have our handle delete function, and what we're doing we're passing it to our table. And inside our table, we're passing it to our table row. Why are we passing table row? Because that's where the logic is with all the buttons. So if you look at our table here, notice how each row has a delete on it. And so depending on which delete I click, it's going to delete that item. So I don't think it's going to work. Let's see it. Oh, yeah. And then the extension I'm using is Copilot. It's amazing. You guys should use it because it makes you type faster. I suck at typing. And so, to me, it makes it easier. So before we test it out, it's probably going to be broken, but before we test it out, what's the advantage of get token from local storage instead of context? So I'll give you an example. So if you're using an application which doesn't have a lot of state, it's something simple, and you don't even need reason to have context, so you could just use local storage because it just makes things easier. Or if you are using GraphQL, which GraphQL has its own state management. So you don't need to use Redux. You don't need to use contacts. You just use GraphQL. And so to get the token, in that case, you would use local storage. But if you're already using contacts, right, you could just save it to contacts. And you could use the pattern that I did where you have your app state living in context, but then you save certain items in a context that you want to save. Like, notice how it doesn't lock me out when I refresh. It's because that token and some of the other items are stored in local storage. Yeah, and that's David said, not David, who said that. Yeah, Carl said it. It's GitHub Copilot. It's amazing. Dude, David, I'm glad that some of this stuff is helping. And it's good for me to practice talking about it, because each time I have to explain it to you, it just helps me be able to do it easier, because this is hard for me too. So I really appreciate all you guys' support and stuff like that. So anyway, we talked about delete. Let's check it out. Let's click delete. So delete, item deleted called. And check this out. I click delete, but the item's still there. So let's refresh and see. We have 5 items. Let's see if it deleted. Okay, so it did delete. So what's going on here? So again, check this out. I'm going to do here, delete. Okay, okay. So if I refresh, we should have 3 items, because the delete functionality works. But what's not working is that we're not telling the application refresh and refetch data that exists. And there's a couple ways to do this. And the way we're going to do it, I'm going to show you how to implement like refetching. And this is why I have my use query hook, because then I could just use that function that allows me to call from anywhere, and I'm able to refetch the data. But I'll show you what I mean here. So to fix this, we're going to go back to our teams. So right now, when we get the response here, nothing's telling React to refetch the data. So this use fetch query, I have a callback function here, right here, and I'm able to use that to refetch my items. So I would just do fetch query team URL, and that's basically the URL hit. So now it's going to refire the fetch query, and it's going to reload the data. So now it should update state every time we delete items. And for now, we're going to keep that there. So let's see if it works. So refresh. So now every time we hit delete, it should refresh the screen. Boom. Notice how the UI is refreshed and the data leaves. So this is awesome, guys. Like, check this out. So, wow, we implemented the delete function. I'll clean up the code after the fact. But look, we had a goal, obviously not to do all of this in one stream. This has been like a bunch of streams in the making. But if you look at my initial MVP, we're able to create team, we're able to update team, we're able to get the team. Now we just implemented a delete option. So we were able to implement full CRUD functionality. And what was made possible to settle that logic up is to set up our backend with Strapi. Strapi basically allows you to bootstrap a Node Express Koa. Well, it's actually Koa, but most people never heard of Koa because I didn't hear about Koa until I started using Strapi. But Koa, it's basically made by the same people that made Express. The only difference is, and they said better than I can, Koa is a new web framework designed by the team behind Express, which aims to be smaller, more expressive, and more robust foundation for web application and APIs. By leveraging async functions, Koa allows you to ditch callbacks and greatly increase error handling. Blah, 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 blah. It's lightweight, basically, that's what it says. And so Strapi is built with Koa. With Strapi, you have this amazing UI where you could check your data, like, you know, or if you're still working on your API, you could actually add data here. But again, I talk about Strapi a lot. But the cool thing is Strapi allowed us to set up an API really quickly. And now we have a React application that now has these features. We have basic authentication. Fantastic. We're able to log out, right? When we log in, we have this concept of making authorized requests, meaning if they have a valid JW token, they're able to make this request. So we're able to make a team. Fantastic. Look, let's make another team. Why not? This is, you know, we're already getting the data. If we weren't getting the data, this wouldn't display. So we got create, C, or post request. We have read, which is showing the data, or get request. We demonstrate. We have delete, which is our delete method. And then we have edit, right? Save. Okay, great. I got to get those alerts out. And boom. And it works. So we basically did create, read, update, delete. We have full CRUD functionality. So what's cool about it, because I didn't try to build out 20 bajillion features, right, in my application, I just set out on a very simple implementation, right? We took teams and we were able to create a team, delete the team, update the team, and show the team. And so now I could use this pattern and apply to whatever you want. You want posts? Great, have posts. You want users? To add a user? Great, we already have a pattern. So the last two things we have left to do here to finish this initial sprint, or our initial MVP, is to implement our sign up form logic, which will not be super hard, but we are going to create a custom controller for that. And I'll show you how to do that, but it's going to show you how you could use Strapi and customize the backend, which is why I love Strapi, because everything you could do in Node, you could do in Strapi, which is like fantastic to me. And that way, like if you're already a JavaScript developer, you're learning React, you're learning JavaScript, someday you're going to learn Node, but maybe you're not comfortable at it yet. Just start with Strapi right away because it's still using Node underneath the hood. And all you need is JavaScript, and you're able to build full stack applications. So all we have left, I think next week, we'll talk about sending emails. And then finally, we'll talk about handling sign up. And then after all of these are green, we're not going to move on to the next feature. We're going to see where we could refactor things to make it better. And then we're going to plan out the next feature and do that same process. But let me know if you guys have any questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure that I save all this amazing stuff we did today. Get status, get add, get commit. And again, I'm committing to a different branch because I don't want to commit to master just in case I have broken changes. And then you could merge everything via PR request. Okay. So what did we do today? Implemented update with put and delete with delete. Well, whatever. I'm bad at writing messages. Get push. And so that's pushed. By the way, guys, if you want to have access to this code, let me quickly go ahead share it with you guys, so you guys could download it and play with it. I mean, there are certain things you will have to set up, but at least you'll have the GitHub. Anna, what's up? How you been? How's it going? Great to see you. So this is the link for the front end. If you guys are interested, it might not have all the commits there yet because I didn't merge these yet, but that's okay. One day it will, but at least you know where it is. And then let me see for the API. I forgot what I called it. Digital Strapi, I think, because it's deployed on DigitalOcean, and then I'll share it here. So you guys more than welcome to check out the code. If you guys have any questions, you could always email me at codingafter30@gmail.com. I also have a community, so if you want to become members of our community, it's on Circle. It's free right now, but the only way to get on is I want people that are actually interested in coding and actually doing stuff that they're supposed to do, right? And so I want to make sure that I don't just get anybody. So I do need to see some effort from you guys. So in a bare minimum, you should either have GitHub or you should have a portfolio site, either or, GitHub, portfolio site, or LinkedIn. Even if you have LinkedIn, email me at codingafter30@gmail.com. Here, I'll share it here with you. Send me either your LinkedIn link, better yet, your GitHub, or better yet, a portfolio, and then I will take a look at it and invite you to this community. But again, everybody who's here, they're all committed to doing work, and I want to keep it that way. So I'm kind of, I know it's not fair. Everybody wants to be part of everything, but it's not that hard. Start a project, start coding, send me that link, and go from there. But with that being said, guys, I know we've already hit our 1 hour and 30 minutes. Like, I'm working a lot these days, so it's really hard for me to do these 3-hour streams like I used to do. But smash the like button if you found value. If you didn't find value, let me know what I could do better next time. Don't just hate on my channel. Just be like, hey, you could do this better next time. Give me some tips so I could improve the content that I provide for you guys. But with that being said, I love all of you guys. Notice how I'm not afraid to show you my terrible live coding skills. Why? Because I don't care what you guys think about me. What I care about is, like, am I putting in the time building projects from scratch? And you guys should be the same way. Don't care about what people think about you. Care about you building a project for your portfolio that's good enough to get hired. And believe it or not, you're going to have to build a couple of different portfolio projects to make sure that you put in your best one, that whenever you go to an interview, you're able to talk about it comfortably. You're able to showcase it and describe code. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why I do these live coding. A lot of times, like, wow, Paul is so nice. He gives us so much value. He's always so friendly. I am obviously all those things. But the reason why I do this Tuesday night live stream is because it forces me to talk about code when I'm not prepared to talk about it. So by doing these live streams and explaining the code to you, running into issues and being like, oh, I don't know what's going on, and then trying to figure out, is helping me to better learn how to talk about code and how to present code. And even if you don't have a YouTube channel, not saying you have to open up a YouTube channel, but create or record yourself teaching someone or walking over your code, create a video describing what you did. By the way, actually, I think that's an awesome idea. What I think I'm going to do is anytime anybody wants to come up on a live stream and talk about the code that they wrote, to use that as practice or showcase your portfolio, or you guys want a portfolio review, let me know. Email me at codingafter30 because I'd love to set that up. But with that being said, guys, I just want to say, if you're jumping in late, all of these streams are recorded. You could always rewatch them on 2 times speed. That's probably the best way without getting your eyes bleeding from all the mistakes I made. Just kidding. It was pretty good. I think we did good today. We did good today. But you're always able to rewatch him. And I do these streams every Tuesday and Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Tuesday, it's all about code like we did today. And Saturday, it's all about soft skills, getting hired. What do you need to do to get hired? What are the things that you need to do? How do you optimize your resume? How do you optimize your LinkedIn? Stuff like that. But with that being said, I love all of you guys. I hope wherever you are, you're having an amazing day. And if not, I hope your day gets better for you. Hope everybody's healthy and safe. And I will talk to you guys later. Have a good night. And I guess good day wherever you are. But for me, it's nighttime. I'm going to have some tea and probably sleep. Take care, guys.